I'm very excited to welcome our second speaker. I just want to check with Michael if she's already in the...
She's already waiting. She's asking if we are recording.
Of course!
Drinking her favorite coffee.
So I'm very, very excited to welcome our second speaker. She is actually dialing in from El Salvador, where she lives, where she is also the head of Belco, a French-based green coffee importing company. And she is a trained in-field engineer, and as such, she has been working with a lot of farmers in El Salvador to introduce new processing methods, like, for example, the honey processing method. And she has also been able to travel to other countries, obviously pre-corona times, like Kenya, like Ethiopia, like Brazil, where she also worked with Daterra, a very big coffee growing company there. I first discovered Marjorie when she was mentioned by Ralph from the barn as somebody who significantly supported a project of theirs with Daterra to grow a very rare variety, the Aramosa variety, and help them also to grow this microlot as a honey in different honey stages, which we were lucky to feature as one of our limited edition coffees in the coffee vine. And it's very exciting to have Marjorie joining us today. She'll be talking about some of the most interesting experimental processing methods that she has been working with, and also sharing some interesting insights into some rare varieties that you might have never heard of before, but that will definitely be making a splash. And she'll be giving you a little bit of insights into that, and maybe also talking about some other projects that she's been working on with some roasters, where you could maybe find some of the coffees that she has helped to produce. So, without further ado, I would like to ask you to please raise some hands and welcome Marjorie Canjura from El Salvador as our second speaker for the day. So make sure that you have some questions already ready for people to for us to answer. Do we see Marjorie?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So I'm going to disappear for now, and we're going to make sure that we listen to Marjorie's wonderful presentation, and we'll be back in about 20 to 25 minutes to answer questions.
Thank you. Well, hi there. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here as one of your speakers. And well, just for introducing myself a little bit, I'm Marjorie. I was born and raised in El Salvador, in a very familiar and warm atmosphere in my country, not in a coffee family, but surrounded by coffee in a very traditional and local way. So my coffee journey began as a professional career, began around 10 to 11 years ago while I was working in a project that took place here in El Salvador in the north region in the country. So the program was sponsored, I remember, by an American NGO, and we supported over 500 small farmers in this region by introducing them to new processing techniques such as honey, such as sun-dried naturals, in which, by the way, by that time, all these processing techniques were kind of brand new. So no one believed, actually, no one believed that these methods of processing coffee were going to have such success. So everyone is processing honeys or naturals right now. So I will always be happy to talk about it because this 3-year experience and talking to the farmers and working with them and their knowledge was basically my school. So I discovered coffee in many means. I discovered coffee, for example, as a mean of contributing to the local communities in the countryside, because let's just remember that coffee producing countries have many issues in common, such as poverty, a really marked inequality. And if we all are coffee lovers, we must know the real history of coffee origins, especially in the Americas or in Africa. So, which is not a romantic version of the history, right? So that could lead you to understand many social facts of the society and coffee that is actually happening right now. Then Another issue is that all these societies are overpopulated societies. And as one thing leads to the other, there is a high rate of deforestation and therefore limited resources and a higher vulnerability to natural disasters as a consequence of climate change, which is getting worse and worse every time. And also due to bad decisions making from or by the government. Then I also discovered coffee as a way of preserving nature. By the way, I'm personally more moved by the environmental and social facts or social side of coffee. So it is scientifically proven that biodiversity, uh, while producing or growing coffee while keeping biodiversity, affects in a positive way to the quality of coffee and also to yields. And finally, I started looking at coffee as a business. So coffee is a way of survival for many people, and farmers are real managers, in fact, because they need to deal with issues they pay salaries, they manage their collaborators, they invest, and if lucky, they earn incomes and so on. And in many cases, and in my personal case, uh, as my background is more scientific and more or my education is more scientific, I'm more amazed. I'm always amazed by reactions, transformations, chemistry, physics, and at a certain point, I was like, all right, I think coffee is my thing. And I guess it happened to me what happened to many of you, that once you get in coffee, you don't want to go out. So almost 5 years ago, I had the chance to join Belco. So this is a French green coffee sourcing company based in Bordeaux, which has a very strong presence at origin. So we have an agency in Ethiopia. We are opening up an agency here in El Salvador, where we are going to develop many interesting projects in the coming months. Then we have a sourcing operation in Colombia and a sourcing operation in Brazil as well. So I'm here representing 1 or 2% out of a whole team at a company with a nice vision, with a very strong platform, and with very solid principles and values. So in a normal time, not this time because of the situation of the pandemic, but in a normal time, I spend a lot of time traveling to coffee regions, visiting our farmers, our producers, or our suppliers at origin, um, interacting with them, discovering new, better practices for farming or for growing coffee, developing together new processing techniques to get different profiles, and always in the pursuit of higher quality and more traceable coffees. In this sense, we act for coffee. So that means that we are main actors to make or help the current coffee situation change for good. Then, especially now with this pandemic situation, and not only coffee, but in general, agriculture is under a high risk right now. So it's really interesting to mention this. But after talking to our suppliers and after knowing the issues that they are being going through because of this pandemic, we came up to the conclusion that from now on, all business relationships and all these commercial interactions and all coffee, negotiations will be based both on quality but also on values. Um, and it is happening right now. So we are all more selective when consuming products, or every time more and more people are becoming aware of the environmental current situation and they look for green, better alternatives. And besides acting for coffee, we want coffee work for producers without affecting nature or other people's lives. Now I would like to read some facts that I find really interesting to share with you after my experience with some farmers. First, I really believe that we are coming back to basics. So just for giving you an example, in coffee agriculture, we have different farming techniques. So in countries like Brazil or Colombia, these techniques tend to be like aggressive. And in the pursuit of increasing productivity and volumes, of course. But if you are compromising, if you are as a farmer are compromising natural resources, or for example, other people's health, or you are exploiting natural resources in your region, it's not okay. So in Colombia, for instance, there is a famous coffee local institution that some years ago advised small farmers to switch from shaded farming to not shaded farming. And what happened? What happened? What many farmers broke because they had to wait the coffee plantations for adapting to a new climate condition, which was a full sun exposure. And some of them didn't make it. And the ones who did were no longer producing quality. And as the specialty coffee market is very competitive, now it is the same institution that is advising farmers to come back to shaded farming. So I guess after this pandemic, many farmers will be forced to try more organic and environmentally friendly alternatives, as agrochemicals or synthetic products will be not be available or not even affordable. Another fact that I want to mention in Central America region at least is that finding foreign varieties is getting very usual. So for example, if you come to El Salvador or if you come to Costa Rica, um, it is really easy to find plantations with, you know, geishas varieties, with varieties from Kenya, for example, or varieties from Ethiopia. So varieties diversification is working okay in this region, and it's actually an alternative to adapt to climate change, and it's totally fair. So on the one hand, it's a shame because these countries should keep their coffee identity. So for example, in El Salvador, it's really weird to find a producer growing red bourbon, for example. So we're still keeping pacamaras and pacas, but at the same time, we are also growing coffee varieties from other countries. So in the pursuit of keeping this industry alive, that's the reason why coffee farmers are choosing to be diverse, and to grow other countries from other countries. And if they're adapting to the local coffee or the climate conditions, it is totally fair and it's okay. Um, then, while traveling, I found recently developed coffee varieties. Just for mentioning some of them, there is one variety called Brute, developed in 2014 in India, grown at 1500 meters above sea level with a very high quality potential. Here in El Salvador, a variety called Bernardina was discovered some years ago by the Pacas family. And after some studies, after some genetic experiments, they came to the conclusion that the profile of this coffee was very similar to those coffees grown in Agaro, a region in Ethiopia. And there is a very interesting variety in Cameroon, developed by a researcher from France whose name is André Charrier. The name of the variety is Charreriana. Uh, and it's really interesting that this is the only non-caffeine free coffee plant from Central Africa. I haven't tasted, but I'm really curious to do it. Um, and an interesting fact addressed to specialty farmers is that now they design their processing techniques themselves. So they are performing as farmers, but at the same time they are performing as designers. So that is to say that there is a higher interest in research. Farmers are becoming more skilled and proactive, therefore more empowered of their coffees. And just for you to have an idea, in coffee processing, we can get four main types of coffee. So, for example, you have fully washed, you have semi-washed, you have honeys, and you have naturals. So, for instance, for getting honeys and naturals, in theory, we don't have to ferment those coffees. Actually, fermentation is what we don't want to happen. But it is different if we make a controlled fermentation. So, for example, fermenting after the pulping or prior to dry. So it's very interesting. I totally support this as long as the farmers are used to record all data to be consistent year to year. Actually, the current Cup of Excellence winner here in El Salvador was a coffee, a natural, anaerobic coffee. So it is totally fair, and it's quite also it is quite common finding producers experimenting with uh, yeast, for example, or any other microorganism or external microorganisms in the pursuit of finding more flavors and more consistency. So this is a very topic as well, where farmers need to understand microbiology fundamentals, and it is totally fair. And regardless the results turning out well or not, it is very interesting as it might set a scientific precedent in coffee, especially in the specialty coffee niche. So, talking about yeast and all these new experiments of anaerobic uh, coffees or longer fermentation and so on, what I've seen is that some farmers are putting all their expectations on these trials or these experimentations, uh, but they are skipping other variables on the field, for example, like for example a pruning, a proper pruning technique, or for example soil health, biodiversity, or for example a proper picking of cherries. So uh, this is not okay, because this is not okay in the sense of if you're adding yeast, it will not be, it will be for nothing, because for example your cherries will not be ripe, so you will not be, you will not have any sugar available to ferment. So so it's a whole, so we depend on nature as well, and it's not an affordable alternative to everyone, so it's quite unfair at some point. And finally, I had the chance to support some projects together with some clients in Ethiopia, in Ecuador, and last year, the Barnes Ralph contacted me to support a project in Brazil. So he contacted me. He told me he's got this idea of developing a microlot of a honey coffee with the Terra in Brazil. So the goal was to produce a different honey with more control variables, with a better management while drying, and with a new variety called Aramosa. And as far as I know, the result was a very balanced coffee with floral notes, sweetness, and acidity. So I want to taste it. I haven't had the chance to do it, but I would love to do it sometime. So that's it from myself. I hope you have found it interested, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Thank you.
Right. Can you make sure that my video and my sound is on? Oh, Marjorie, you don't have to stop your video quite yet.
I
We
did
would
it.
still like to
I
do a
didn't do
little
it.
Q&A with you. So
I
if you're
didn't do
still
it.
here.
I didn't do it.
Okay. So can you put me back as well, please?
Of course. You are?
All right. Yeah, I don't see myself yet in the screen. Let's. All right. Can you all see me?
Yeah.
You can see me? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Marjorie. It was wonderful to listen to your wonderful story and to hear about all the projects that you are working on. Maybe we can zoom in a little bit as well to blend out some of the empty chair that Leonard left behind after he went away. Super interesting to hear about some of the projects that you've been working on in El Salvador. I have to say I've always been a big fan of honeys from El Salvador. We've had quite a lot of them already in our coffee boxes. Actually, one of the best one was from Los Pirineos. Do you know that farm?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I would love to hear a little bit more about, personally, I would love to hear a little bit more about how farmers respond to suggestions to change their processing methods, to introduce new processing methods. Because it is risky, right? For some farmers, if they're not as skilled, they could potentially ruin a whole crop if they mess it up. So how do you effectively convince them to take this risk?
Well, it takes long. First, to try to convince them, because historically they have produced coffee as underwashed processing techniques. So at first, it's a very new experience for them. However, they are very curious to try and to experiment new things. In El Salvador, for example, in this project that I had the chance to be part of, the thing was that these farmers were very small farmers. So they didn't have access to water. As they were small, they didn't have, like huge processing coffee facilities. So they didn't have water available, as I already mentioned. So they were close-minded in the idea of that coffee could only be processed or produced with water. So we explained them that it was possible to produce coffee with no water. And actually, for me, it's easier to explain them that you have two ways of producing coffee. Very simple, like using water or without using water. So if you want to use water, you will produce wash or semi-wash coffee. And if you don't use water, you will produce honeys or naturals. So at first, for them, it's really easy. I mean, the process seems to be really easy to get done, but it is not, because as you are not fermenting under controlled conditions, you can get wild fermentations. If, for example, producers do not do a proper management while drying, or a proper management while storing them. So it's quite risky. It's a very low, cheap process, but you have to invest in labor, because you have to be, you always have to keep an eye on the process every day, moving the coffee, because you don't want it to ferment.
Dan is visible. You should not be visible. Sorry. Go ahead.
And well, that's it.
And how do you mitigate the risks? So, because obviously there's a lot of different things that can go wrong in the chain, but it's basically, the question is obviously how can roasters maybe diversify their production, for example, by introducing different processing methods, but also one of the things that I think is also happening in some places is that farmers are actually planting trees that are native to other continents. So I think I've kind of like at some point had an SL28 and 34 coffee grown in Panama or something like that, which was very, very rare. And this was such a unique coffee, but these kind of things don't happen very often, right? So what is the kind of like, what is the openness to taking a risk from the farmers when it comes to these kind of things on a larger scale?
Well, first, we have to remember that coffee is an agricultural product, so we depend on nature. So first, we have to respect that.
Yes.
And we need to adapt to climate conditions. So that is at farming, of course, and at processing level, there are many techniques or many steps that you can follow in order to try to control all the variables that you have. So, for example, for producing coffee, it is important to get your machines calibrated. It is important to dry your coffees under to, to dry your coffees on raised drying beds
Raised,
instead of
yes,
instead of
on the
directly on a
ground.
patio on the ground. Yes, it is important to respect the coffee layer, width, which cannot be more than or higher than 3 centimeters maximum.
Hmm.
And then you have to respect how you have to know how many times to move the coffee and when to move them.
Right. So to make sure that they dry evenly.
Yeah, to make sure to have a uniform drying,
Yeah,
to make sure you don't have any not controlled fermentation, and to make sure the final result will be the
the
expected
best.
or the one that you want.
Right.
So what I was mentioning in my talk, which I don't know if was clear, is that a phenomenon that is happening right now, at least in coffee origin, is that farmers are becoming designers as well. So, for example, in a very basic honey processing technique, in theory, you don't need to ferment coffees. But farmers are trying to ferment, for example, after the pulping, they are fermenting, like 12 or 16 hours to see what happened. Or they are fermenting after, or for example, for natural coffees, they pick the cherries, they ferment a little bit, and then they dry
Yeah.
in the pursuit of getting different coffee profiles or more interesting flavors,
Interesting.
interesting to the market. So
Yeah.
they are performing farmers and also as designers of their own processing techniques, which is
That's a
really, it's amazing. It's amazing
that's
because they feel more empowered. So they can be more empowered. They
mhm.
know better their products, so they can be able to negotiate better or fair prices with their clients.
That's a really beautiful way to describe how a farmer is a designer of his own output. I really love that analogy. Michael, do we have any questions from the audience already?
Yes, we do.
Wonderful. Marjorie, are you ready to take some questions from the audience?
Yes, I am.
Exciting. Wonderful.
So maybe this kind of question was partly answered, but do you think the future of the coffee farming lies in a permaculture?
So the question is, do you think that the future of coffee lies in permaculture?
Permaculture. I think it's too soon, like to try something like it. I think
Okay.
we still need to upgrade what we think we know, because we
Yes.
don't know. We don't know.
We don't know
We
enough.
still we don't know. We still don't know enough in
Yeah,
coffee.
absolutely.
So, and normally farmers are very limited to try new things, especially small farmers. So I think it's too soon. That's
Because
my
you
opinion.
basically, your role is to provide the knowledge and the skills and also the kind of case studies, basically, to say to a
Yeah,
farmer, hey, look, XYZ did this already,
yeah,
they achieved these results, and this
yeah,
is really a great way for you to
yeah,
increase your production or to introduce a new processing method.
yeah.
And thereby you share knowledge, which is then, at the end of the day, knowledge is power, right?
Yes, and what I say is because I say it because when I go to a new coffee origin to work with new farmers, you realize that they are experts.
Yeah,
They have skills, but you need to adjust it. And you need to help them explore their potential.
yeah. Of course.
So
Many
you
of them, many
realize,
of them have the potential in
yes,
them, but they don't have the right tools to
yeah.
find it.
So you realize there is still a lot to do.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do we have more
So they
questions
need
from the
so
audience?
they need to be
Oh,
more skilled
my
first.
apologies. Go
No, it's
ahead.
okay. So they need to develop their skills first to go to
Yes,
the next step.
of course. Like with any trade, you need to become an expert
Yeah,
to really.
that is talking about small farmers, but of course you have other more large scale farmers that
Yeah.
have all the tools to make trials, to experiments with new processing techniques, with new varieties, with new farming practices, which is a really different scenario.
Actually, speaking of this, because obviously the coffee that we shared from the barn, which was the Aramosa variety from Da Terra, which you helped to cultivate, I would love to hear if there's any other really experimental or rare variety that you are currently working on, or something that people might not know about, which has a lot of potential or which has very unique characteristics in terms of flavor that we can maybe expect to see a bit more of in the future.
Well, not really, but in my experience, all varieties in Ethiopia were new for me because
Really?
there it's really weird like to have them classify them. So normally when you go to Ethiopia, you find farmers, really small farmers, and they mix them all.
Yeah, that's what they call mixed heirloom, right? So it's all mixed
Yes,
together.
they mix them, and actually maybe this mix it's gives what also gives a different profile.
Hmm.
But I've worked with varieties like Obata. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Nope.
So this variety, well, I've heard it for the first time in. I saw it for the first time in Dominican Republic. I know it's not from Dominican Republic. I think it's from Brazil, I guess.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. Let me confirm that. But it was really interesting because the performance of this coffee variety at the farm was really crazy. I mean, the flowering was crazy. The height it's really like crazy as well. But the flavor, the coffee flavor in the end is really balanced
Oh,
and it's really productive.
yeah.
So uh, varieties such as Ovata and such as other ones are like an alternative for producers to produce and at the same time to get quality or to get different attributes
Hmm.
and being this variety resistant or tolerant to to extreme conditions, for example.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And then when I
So,
travel in the varieties that I mentioned, that was really rare for me, uh, but I haven't had the chance to really work with them.
okay. Wonderful. Do we have another question from the audience before we go?
Yeah, while we don't know the future of a coffee farming about permaculture, then we know something probably about geisha.
Okay.
So a
We have a
question
question about geisha.
from Patrice Sadler. I recently drank a geisha for the first time. Do you think that geisha is a trend with pricing being artificially pumped up? Do you think with more and more farmers growing geisha in the future, the price and the hype alike will go down? Is the price fair, meaning is the lot harder to grow, or is it yield a lot of less?
Okay. I'm not sure if you heard that, but I'm just going to repeat the question and
Yeah,
summarize
please.
it. So geisha is obviously a big trend right now. You know, a lot of competition coffees are geishas. And we had a question here that said, are geishas a hype that will probably burst like a bubble? Because, at some point all farmers are going to start growing these kind of coffees, and then there will be such a big supply in the market that geisha will no longer be that special. What is your view on this? And are prices artificially inflated to make the coffee more special?
Yeah, talking about prices, I really believe prices are really influenced by the Japanese, you know, trend.
Okay.
So I also believe that in the case of Panama, well, Panama is a really particular country. Actually, all coffees from Panama are quite more expensive
Mm-hmm.
than other coffees, but it's because a local situation that's happening in the country. So they fix the price based on a local roster, which is quite expensive. So that
Okay.
is like the price based to fix the prices for exports. So that is one aspect. Then, of course, Panama I really believe that it's because the geographical location that has Pacific influence and Atlantic influence. So this country has all the conditions to grow coffee
Mm-hmm.
of a really high quality. So if I see the farmers growing more and more geishas, I would say yes. I would say yes because well, in coffee now that information is available everywhere, so farmers can hear everything about it. So
Yeah.
they are more willing to try new varieties to grow. And in El Salvador, it's happening. I mean, farmers are growing geishas, and but what I advise is they have to investigate before, because
Mm-hmm.
geisha is not so productive, even though the quality can
Can be exceptional.
turn, yeah, it could be exceptional. It can turn out well,
Yeah.
but you don't have to be based only, or you don't have to put all your expectations on
Mm-hmm.
the coffee plant, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to process the coffee well, you have to
Yeah.
dry it well, you have to store the coffee well. So
It's a lot of moving
that's it.
parts involved.
Yes, but yeah, I do see many farmers growing geishas every time.
Mm. Okay, that's an interesting insight. How are we guys doing on time?
We have time only for two more questions.
Okay, two more
Very
questions, Marjorie,
quickly, or
before we say goodbye to you, and you can start your day. I think it's 7 a.m. in El Salvador, so you have the
No,
whole day ahead of you.
it's 6:30, so it's okay.
Oh,
It's late
6:30.
already.
Okay, all right. So, do we have another question?
yes, what are the major impacts from a climate change specifically for coffee farms in El Salvador?
That's a really good point, actually. I think you'll probably have some really interesting insights. What are the biggest impacts of climate change on coffee growing regions in El Salvador? And is there anything that you can see already that could potentially be a danger to coffee farms or the coffee production in El
Yeah.
Salvador in general?
Yeah. First of all, we don't have to blame climate change because climate change has always existed. So the direct responsibles of if these consequences are getting worse, it's all of us.
Right.
So yeah, of course, there are many bad consequences for coffee agriculture here in the country. One of them is that there is no water available, and if there is, it is polluted.
Mm-hmm.
We are very vulnerable to natural disasters. For example, El Salvador in particular is very vulnerable to earthquakes. So we
Mm-hmm.
have earthquakes happen every day. So earth is shaking every day here in El Salvador. Um, so as we are an overpopulated country, you can imagine the disaster that happens when it shakes, right?
Sure.
Recently, like 2 or 3 um, weeks ago, we had a storm, and as we don't have, green places full of trees, water cannot be absorbed. So
You had flooding.
water, yeah, we have a disaster in the city. So people dying, and it's really sad. Um, what else? Our soils are getting erosion as well. So when you get erosion, means that there is no water, there is no life in
Mm-hmm.
the soil, so you cannot grow anything in the soil.
Yeah.
So the fastest way of a farmer to produce is to put agrochemicals. So they invest in agrochemicals,
And then they pollute the earth more.
they pollute earth more, so the soil is washed off, so they
Mm-hmm.
pollute water and so on.
Yeah. So it's kind of a
So
vicious cycle, isn't it?
yeah, and yeah, in particular in El Salvador, we are not a referent on productivity because we are not producing the volumes that we used to do it like in the 50s or in the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
but we are a reference of quality at least.
That's great. That's a really nice note to end on. I think what I'd like to do now is also do a poll for Marjorie. We have a poll for the audience, and we're just going to put it up on the screen now. And if everybody can vote, that would be wonderful. And we'll share the results in due course. So let's go, guys. Vote in our little poll so we can all get some results from you guys and see what you think. We'll give you a couple more seconds to cast your vote. All right.
Wow.
How are we doing, Michael?
50% of people voted.
Come on, guys. Cast your vote. Cast your vote.
Still got time.
We'll give you 5 more seconds.
Yeah, we just have half of people responded, so we'll wait a little longer.
I would say.
Well, the question is, do you think experimental lots are worth the money?
Yeah, I think, this is considering...
influencing the survey now.
No, but it's a question that is related to this project that Marjorie worked on, the project with La Terra and the Barn, which was a limited edition coffee, which was very small production. And I think the question is simply related to, are people willing to spend money on things like this because they are more unique and they're harder to get and they're maybe offering a different kind of flavor experience? Or are they just quite happy to continue drinking, regular, really good coffee, but they're not so interested in these limited editions? Let's see the voting. How did people vote?
So
Can we see?
81% people voted yes.
Okay. All right.
16% no. 1% no opinion.
Okay. Well, that's a clear answer, Marjorie. I think your projects are definitely getting some resonance with coffee drinkers, and of course, we want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us at this very early hour from El Salvador, and we hope that you can soon travel again to all the different places that you work with and continue sharing your wonderful knowledge and skills. Michael, can you take the poll off the screen? Thank you. So thank you so much, Marjorie. It was wonderful to have you here today, and we wish you a very successful day and hope to see you one day in person somewhere.
Yeah, no, thank you so much and have a nice day.
Thank you. All right.